Good afternoon. Today we are working on CO3. CO3 is I can order rational numbers and identify opposites and absolute values. So putting them in order, what's the smallest, what's the largest, and we're going to talk about the opposites and what that means, and we're going to talk about absolute value. So in order to do that, we need to know some definitions. So we're not trying to work ahead on our work problems. We are paying attention. Eyes are up here so we can see what definitions we need to write. So one of the things we are going to be able to identify is an absolute value. The absolute value is the distance of a number from zero. So the distance of that number from zero. So we say that is how far it is from zero. So when we're looking at our number line, we're going to be jumping. How many jumps to get to zero? So if I was at 5, I would jump to 0. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. Let's look at our negative numbers. If I'm at -3, I need to jump to 0. Thank you to my friends who have their eyes up here. So if I'm at -3, I need to jump to 0 to see how far away it is. So I would go 1, 2, 3. So the absolute value of -3 is 3. So if you notice, whether it was 5, absolute value is 5, or -3, the absolute value is 3, absolute values are always going to be a positive number, because we're talking about how many jumps away from 0 it is. So absolute value, whether our number started as positive or started as negative, the absolute value will always be positive. When we are talking about the absolute value of something, we can see it like when we take our math test, you will see this. If we're talking about that -3, if we want the absolute value of it, you will have a bar on each side of it. That means they want the absolute value. So how many steps away from 0 is it? So what's the absolute value of -3? Well, 3. It's 3 steps away from 0. Okay, so when you see those lines on both sides of your number, it means absolute value. Opposite numbers are numbers that are the same distance from 0. So if they're the same distance from 0, they have the same absolute value. So if I have my -3, what would its opposite be? Remy? 3. If I have my +5, what is its opposite, Olivia?
-5.
-5. So you take the number, and if it was a positive, you put it as a negative. And if it was a negative, you put it as a positive. That's its opposite. Another term for the opposite of a number is its additive inverse. The inverse means you're flipping it. So we're going from -3 to 3. We flipped from a negative to a positive. Or from 5 to -5, we flipped from positive to negative. So it's that additive inverse. This is because a number's opposite is whatever you can add to it in order to make 0. 5 is 5 steps away, so negative 5 is 5 steps away. They're both 5 steps away from 0. We want the same number that will get the same amount of jumps to 0. All right, I'm going to erase this so I can scroll up. For each value, A through F labeled on the number line, you're going to write the number, the value of the number, its opposite, and its opposite absolute value. For each letter G to K, plot its value on the number line, then write its opposite and absolute value. So, if we look at A, what is, oh, it doesn't give us a line for it. So up here, we should actually have another line because we have to write what the actual value is. It says write the number, the value of the number, then we're going to put its opposite and then its absolute value. So for A, what is the value of A? Eliana. It's negative 5, so I'm going to put negative 5 here. What's negative 5's opposite? Desi? 5. And what's negative 5's absolute value? James? 5. So it kind of looks like that's a fraction. It's not a fraction. Yeah? Okay. So we're going to do the same thing for B, C, D, E, and F. You put the value of that letter, you put its opposite, you put its absolute value. Addie.
Does it matter if I put the line below the 2? Because below instead of the top?
So if you put it down here
Yes.
and said its value is negative 5, that's fine.
Okay.
That might actually work because this made it look like it was a fraction. So if you want to write it below so we don't think it's a fraction, that's fine too. Okay? Like, I like your way better than my way.
5 minus 5.
So down below, we are given G is 1 2/3. Where would I plot 1 2/3 on my number line? Grayson.
Like anything 1 and 0, but put it close to 0.
Grace, what were you gonna say?
I thought we did.
Okay, let's look at G. Grayson has one thought of putting it between the 0 and the 1. We know it's in between. It's not actually at the 1 because there's a fraction. 1 2/3. Is it in between 0 and 1? Are there any other thoughts on this one? Claire G.
Between 1 and 2.
So Grayson was thinking between 0 and 1. Claire's thinking between 1 and 2. Which one do you think it would be? Thumbs up if you think it's between 0 and 1. Thumbs down if you think it's between 1 and 2. Grayson, you changed your mind. Why did you change your mind?
Because I thought it was negative.
Oh, okay. But with it being a positive 1, we know it is definitely all the way to 1. And then that fraction of 2/3. Would I put 2/3 way over here? No, because 2/3 is more than a half. So I would put it more than a half. So about right there. And I would call that G. Now I have to say its opposite and its absolute value. So what is the opposite of 1 2/3? Madden?
Negative 1 2/3?
Negative 1 2/3. And what would its absolute value be? Lucas?
1 2/3.
1 2/3. So pay careful attention, especially when we get something like 9/5. What do we have to do to 9/5 in order to be able to graph it? Kaylin? And what mixed number would you get, Addie?
You would get negative 1 4/5. Wait.
Negative 1, you were right. Negative 1 4/5. So then you're going to graph that. But Grayson, remember, we still have to go all the way to that -1 and then come to the left. Okay, because we still have that whole step away and then 4/5 after it. So it's not going to be going towards the 0 then. We have the whole step away from 0 and then the fraction goes to the left this time. Claire?
When we do like the opposite of it, will we do 9/5 or 1 4/5? Which one?
The 1 4/5 is to help us graph it, but this is the number they gave us, so we want the opposite and absolute value of it. Great question. So it's -9/5. What would its opposite be? Claire?
9/5.
And what would its absolute value be? Claire?
9/5.
9/5, because the opposite of the negative is the positive. And if we were at -1 and we want to graph 4/5, that's almost a whole, so it's going to be close to over here. Then we have some questions at the bottom. You are going to have to read the questions and try to answer them the best that you can. So you need to answer those questions. So don't just do that middle section. You also have to answer the questions at the bottom. And it's a 1-page objective today. We have about 11 minutes before class is done. So you have work time, but there's a lot we have to do. You need to go slow. What happens if we go too fast because we don't want homework? Addie?
You'll get it wrong
Why?
because you're going too fast and you're rushing through it.
And what happens when we rush?
You might skip some stuff or multiply or add it wrong.
You make those simple math mistakes. Okay, when we rush, we make simple mistakes. Even I, as an adult, make simple mistakes when I go too fast. Do not go too fast. It's more important that you understand than not having homework. Okay, it'll take you all of 5 minutes at home to do this. 10 minutes. Don't rush. 10 minutes isn't a big deal. Do your best work. For my friends listening at home, we hope you are well and we hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.